Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the founder of the Empowered Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode brings real conversations with people around the world who have navigated grief and discovered the strength to create new, inspired beginnings. Together, we'll walk from grief to empowerment through stories, practical tools, and actionable insights. You'll uncover the hidden gifts within your grief, reclaim your personal power, and step into a future filled with courage and hope. Today, I have a guest I'm really excited to have on the show. Her name is Bracha Goetz, and she is a Harvard educated author of 45 children books and a candid memoir for adults about her journey to joy. One of her books is called Nourish the Soul, Filling the Emptiness Within. Her newest picture books include The Happiness Box, Oh, What God Can Do, and The Mother Who Always Said Yes. And so I'm really excited to talk to somebody who's published that many books and learn more about Braca's grief journey and what led her to become such a published author. So without further ado, Braca, welcome to the show.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Likewise. And just to get us started, tell us a little bit about your grief journey and what led you to become an author.
Okay. I would say my grief journey started around age 12. Just as I became an adolescent, I read I read The Diary of Anne Frank, and I was changing as a person. I started a diary then. That's actually what became my memoir. My memoir is the compilation of entries from my diary. And then when I got older, I called it a journal and I put letters home. I wrote in it and I filled in the missing pieces. And it tells the story of me starting at age 12 and just my, like, an expansion of consciousness happened at that age because I just started thinking. Like, up until that point, I was just a child. And then I started wondering, what's the purpose of life? And this really took over my whole being. I just kept searching and searching and exploring all different kind of things, searching for the purpose of life. Um, it's actually how I ended up going to Harvard too, because I just wanted to learn about everything. And I figured maybe if I go there, like it's like the seat of wisdom and I'll find out what I'm looking for. Um, and because of this search got more and more desperate through the years, I developed like food addictions. And that's why I would say the grief began. It was a grief because I read in your description of your show that you're grieving a life that no longer fits. That's what happened. My life no longer fit. It was like, why do we get up every morning to go to work, to make money, to live another day, to go to work again? What's it all for? What is the purpose of all this? That's what I had to find out. So, like, thinking at that in those years, I thought maybe I'll find out at Harvard, and like does fame and fortune and power, is that what makes life worthwhile? I still didn't know. And so I went for that mirage, like a mirage, like, and when I got to the top of the mountain and I met all these famous people there and powerful people, I saw that they were also unhappy and searching for more. So that wasn't it. So all those illusions were over at a pretty young age. And I was grateful that they were over, but I still had such an inner emptiness, even though my life looked successful on the outside. Like, here I was at Harvard and doing well and studying psychology, but I felt so empty within. And that's why no amount of food could fill me up. And as with all addictions, like, a person tries to fill up on externalities, but to fill that hole, but it's not a physical hole. So I didn't know how to fill it, and I tried all different kind of things, searching. I went on to medical school wanting to become a psychiatrist, still searching and not even knowing how would I eventually give my patients an understanding of why life was worth living if I didn't know myself. By the time I got to medical school, I was really in active addiction with these eating disordered behaviors, and it took over my whole life. That's what addictions do. Like it absorbed my intelligence, my energy, my emotions, and it was like living in a prison. So I experienced a lot of grief at that time, even though nobody knew, because an addiction you keep secret and you put a ton of energy into coping mechanisms that nobody should know what's going on. So that's how life went until that summer. I visited a psychiatrist um, who helped the medical students. And I divulged to this psychiatrist that I felt so messed up. I finally told somebody all the bizarre behaviors I was doing. Like I spilled out everything to this psychiatrist, and he said to me, I know that you think like you're in a really, really bad place, but you keep describing that you're searching for something spiritual. So maybe this summer, like you have a 6 week break, you're going to find what you're looking for. Because I had plans to go to Israel that summer. And it was interesting because he was a Japanese psychiatrist. He wasn't from, my background at all, but he could perceive this about me better than I could. And that's what happened. Actually, that summer, everything changed. And I actually changed my whole life's course after that summer.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I want to say I can resonate with you on that searching for things in life. And I love that you read Anne Frank's diary because one of the books that really impacted me a few years ago was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And
Yes.
for listeners that haven't read that book or know what it's about, Viktor Frankl was faced with this very big dilemma of escaping Nazi Germany and going to the United States by himself and leaving his whole family behind, or going to Auschwitz with them and hoping for the best. And he describes his time through Auschwitz with his family, and he lost all his family members, by the way. But he talks about how people coped in that such harsh environment of seeing death and mortality and fighting over belongings. They would steal things, they would hurt each other, and he talked a lot about what that experience was like. And it really led you to this profound place, not so much of the gruesomeness of the Holocaust, but it was really about what do we search for as people? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of why we're here? And it's not about, as you said, Bracha, all these external things we drive for, like jobs and money and houses and cars and, our status of wealth. That none of that really has anything to do with our purpose here. And so I love that you went on a spiritual journey, by the way. And I want to ask you about that. What was it like when you ended up going to Israel in that time period? And did that help you find what you were looking for?
Yeah, it did. And it was amazing. When I put this book together, my memoir is called Nourish the Soul, Filling the Emptiness Within. I put it together after I read through my old diaries, and I saw the thread going through because I didn't understand what one thing had to do with the other. I didn't understand that my addictions had to do with this search, this unrelenting search and the emptiness. I didn't understand that. So when when I finally found what I was looking for, and then there was no longer a need for the addictions and I began to heal, that's when I looked in these diaries to see, wait a minute, what did one thing have to do with the other? Why was I finally able to heal and become a joyful person again when I found the spiritual fulfillment that I was looking for? And that's when I put it all together. So, um, and that's the purpose of the book, showing people That's what it's about once we understand the purpose. So I got to go back to my roots and learn about my spiritual heritage because although I was brought up with a culture, I wasn't brought up with a spiritual understanding. So I'm going to tell you what the basis of it is. The basis of what I learned spiritually and what changed my whole life is that the purpose of life, what we're doing here, the purpose of life is to experience gratitude, to enjoy this world in gratitude. And we get so far off the mark from that. Um, and so basically that's what I do with my children's books. I'm teaching children from as early in life as possible how to live with gratitude, how to practice gratitude. Um, uh, uh, Even some of my books are for toddlers, but I'm showing how to look at the world in a grateful way, how to see the world through grateful eyes. Because for me, um, life was full of color when I was a child, and then it got grayer and grayer. And when I put gratitude back into my life, the colors came back. And that's how I see the world now again.
Can I ask you a powerful question? We're going through so much turmoil in the world right now. There's a lot of division, a lot of hate, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of very negative energy going on, and there's a lot of people very, very hurt right now. How can we help more people get to that place of gratitude in a world that's filled with so much chaos and animosity right now?
Exactly. And let me tell you, right now I'm in Israel. So I'm really in a very well, this is the vortex of spirituality. I mean, the city of Jerusalem is like the vortex. So there's so many wars that have gone on in this area. It's funny because it's called Jerusalem means the city of peace. And this is a place where there's wars like I was never in a war zone myself until these past 2 years. This was my first experience of war in my whole life. And and what I can tell you, and even from the hostages that have just been released, what helped them survive each day was gratitude. They all say that. They all learned to become more grateful people, even in the tunnels, even in dark tunnels where they never saw the light, where they were given one pita a day, one bread a day to eat. That's it. All they had. They learned to be thankful people. They got to that resource within themselves. They found their souls and they learned how to nourish their souls in the darkest place on earth. So, how do you do it? You start, what I learned about, this is not coming from my brain. This is from ancient wisdom, is something called the pleasure ladder. And there's 5 levels of pleasure. And I was listening to another podcast that you had on. It was a show, her name was Jess Moyer. Jess Moyer, she was amazing. And I said, "Oh my goodness, she also talked about 5 levels." And it was I resonated very much with what she said. These 5 levels, they correspond to our 5 fingers because we have within our hands the ability to bring pleasure into our lives at any moment. We have that power. And and so these 5 levels also correspond to the 5 levels of the human soul. The lowest level of the soul is the part that's attached to our body. This level of the soul is activated by all the sensual, natural sensual pleasures in this world, like eating healthy food, spending time in nature, moving, dancing, doing yoga, gardening, swimming, music. What we experience with our senses, When we experience these natural pleasures with gratitude, that brings us to the lowest level of pleasure. It's real pleasure. And each level up the ladder brings more connection and more lasting pleasure. Because when we're in a state of addiction or depression or anxiety, and we feel we're very self-centered, we are very we feel estranged from the world, we feel disconnection, alienation. When we begin to connect even with one thing in the world, like an orange, and we experience it with gratitude, we begin to feel connection again. And this brings us real pleasure because, like, this is an example of how do you bring pleasure into your life. This is a tiny example. An orange is one of my favorites because, like all the fruit, are green when they are attached to the trees because they're camouflaged in, they're being protected, they're green like the leaves. But when they become ready for us, they become the most vivid, bright, beautiful colors. So they're a pleasure to look at. So they're shouting, "We're ready for you." And then they smell beautiful. And here with an orange, the sweet juiciness is kept in for months. So the orange that you hold in your hand, it's packed with so much loving kindness and wisdom for you to experience the care. And when you finish eating it, which is another pleasure, the taste, um, you're left with these seeds. And the seeds have the potential to become infinite more trees, infinite more oranges. So this is like such an amazing gift. And this is just one thing in your life. We have an abundance of gifts in our life every single moment. But the reason why we overeat or engage in addictions is because we don't feel that abundance. We feel a scarcity of pleasure in our lives. So we keep overeating and we often overeat junk, which is designed to be addictive instead of bring us real pleasure. And so we just keep stuffing our faces because what we all want is lasting pleasure. So we do that, and then it doesn't have a good effect because it leaves us feeling even emptier afterwards. But when we experience the natural pleasures with gratitude, we're left feeling grateful. It's a totally different experience.
So, what at point did you decide when you were going through that addiction phase of things to seek help? Because I know a lot of people that go through addictions. There's a lot of people that relapse with it. There's not many people that are able to break free of it completely, which I mean is totally understandable, by the way. I'm not judging anybody. But I'm
Right.
really curious, what was that like for you when you did get to that point of wanting help?
Yes. So I I didn't know how to stop. I couldn't stop even though I knew what I was doing. Like an addiction is like when you know you're doing a compulsive behavior that's detrimental to you, but you continue to do it anyway. Your life is unmanageable. So I knew what I was doing made no sense, but I couldn't stop it because I didn't know. I was, I was like, I'm going to say symbolically starving. I wasn't being filled up in life. Once I was able to nourish my genuinely hungry soul, there was no longer a need for the addiction. So immediately, it wasn't like, okay, now I'm all better and now it's gone, but it was a gradual thing. I found that I was just having these terrible binges less and less often. There was not that craving for it anymore because I was never running on empty anymore. I had a basic understanding. I had a basic gratitude in life. I appreciated what we're here for. I understood that's our goal. That is exactly what we're here to do. Appreciate this world. Appreciate that it's a gift. See it that way and not take it all for granted. Once that began to change, it was once I integrated it into my life, once I practiced gratitude more and more, I the binges were just like dissipating. It wasn't happening anymore.
That's what I was really curious about. Was it like they call it in the States like going cold turkey, just quitting completely. But was it like a gradual, it went away over time type of situation?
Yeah, because like in the book, in the memoir, I talk about, okay, now I learn this, I get it, but now I go out and I have a binge. It's not fully in me. I'm still integrating it, you know? Like I show that it doesn't happen like automatically, but what does happen instantaneously is that when you feel gratitude, you fill up. That happens
Mm.
immediately. It's an amazing thing. That craving, like the bag of potato chips, is not screaming your name anymore as you fill up with gratitude. It doesn't have that same effect.
So what was that like for you when you did break free of things? I know you talk a lot about gratitude, but what ways did that show up for you in your journey of healing?
Um, like I'm gonna give an example here too. Like the middle level is meaning, doing something good and meaningful. These are all ways that help to heal a person. And I was on another show where the host said that he bought a whole box of pizza and he was feeling lonely and depressed. He had two slices of pizza and he's about to plow through the whole box by himself. There was a knock at the door, and his neighbor needs his help for 2 minutes to like move furniture or something. He helps his neighbor. He comes back, he looks at the pizza, and he doesn't need it anymore. He right away filled up. Why? He filled up with gratitude that he could give to another. He no longer felt so isolated and alone. He could put the rest of the pizza in the fridge for another day. That's how it works in my life. I feel like overeating. I'll still have a tendency to have that feeling the hard part is stopping. That's the hard part. Um, so let's say I'm eating something and I just feel like I'm going to just keep eating it. One of the things I do now is you don't fill up your next spoon or fork full of food until you've completely chewed and swallowed what's already in your mouth. Why? Because you're getting used to it. You're getting used to enjoying what you already have and not jumping on to the next bite in life. This practice be, gets you to form the new habit which spreads into your entire life, not just with eating. It spreads into your whole life that you begin to just focus on what you're already doing, what you already have. You take things for granted less and less, and then you're not craving more and more and more of what you don't have. Because all day long we have a voice inside of us getting us to focus on what we're lacking, what we're missing in life. And when we recognize that, I teach this, this is what children are learning from my books really early on. We all have that voice. We all think we're the only ones with that voice, but it's totally normal. We're given that voice. And one of my books, it took me 30 years to write this book until I had all the life wisdom I needed to do it, which is to know that even that voice is put into you by God. It's given to you, that voice that's telling you to focus on what you're missing, because our job is to recognize that voice and then overpower it and go, wow, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get miserable right now. I'm not going to think about what I'm missing, what I'm lacking. I'm going to focus on what I already have. It's like a weight. It's like a personal trainer. It pushes on you. It says, oh, you should be miserable. You should be unhappy. You don't have this. You don't have that. And you go, oh no, I'm going to push off this weight. And that's how you grow your gratitude muscles. When you recognize it, you embrace it, you allow that feeling, and then you nourish your hungry soul. You push it off and you say, I'm going to be grateful for what I already have. I'm going to refocus on all the blessings in my life right now. That's the more you practice doing it, it feels really weird at first. Like when you drive a car on a road that doesn't exist yet and it's very gravelly and shaky and weird. But once you put the grooves in the road, it gets easier and easier. Those are the neural connections that we make because our brains have neuroplasticity. We can change our brains into gratitude brains just by making more and more neural connections by practicing gratitude.
Well, I think that's definitely something that a lot of us struggle with in the world because, like you mentioned and alluded to, we are in a lot of ways, especially here in the States, I see it all the time. We're in this like scarcity mindset. And I went to a store not too long ago, Costco. We have it's a wholesale distribution. You can get food and everything in mass quantity of things. And I was seeing people. I don't go to Costco very much often anymore for the last few years since COVID happened. And anyway, when I do go, I grab one or two things that I had necessity need. But I was one day just watching people walking out of the store, and I saw people with, huge bottles of soda, lots of pizza, lots of ice cream, lots of, excess of everything. And it kind of hit me one day, and I said, do we really need all this stuff? Do we really absolutely need these things? And I know some people listening are going to go, well, yeah, I need it. I like it. I want it. And I get that. I respect you and I'm not judging, but I'm also sitting there kind of like you're alluding to today on the podcast of saying, do we really need this? Is this actually bringing me happiness? Because at a certain point, we could have all the money in the world and you can still be depressed. You could have all the food you want, by the way, for years on end and you still be depressed. So at the end of the day, it's really digging deeper into that purpose of what's my mission here? What's my purpose of life? What am I here to accomplish? What can I achieve? And I think when we find that deeper meaning, not so much in that externality of things or material possession, by the way, but in that place of what we're here to do, I think we let go of those things so much faster. And I used to be a very material person in many ways. I have lost a lot of stuff over the last few years, and I don't miss it, by the way. I just don't miss that stuff. I don't know why. I sit there and say I just don't need it anymore. It doesn't bring me happiness.
Right.
Um, and I think part of that is, I've found that deeper mission, that deeper purpose in my life. And so I've kind of, it's almost like you replace that addiction need of things with something else. And then that something else, by the way, when it's replaced with gratitude on top of it, it just becomes such a more powerful force in your life that it overcomes those other, externalities.
Exactly. Exactly. When when we find fulfillment, that's when you no longer need those addictions because that's really what we were looking for. That's what we had addictions just to bring that temporary comfort in our lives. But actually, comfort keeps us from experiencing true pleasure.
So how do we, I want to come back to my question I asked earlier because it is a very powerful one that, especially in the United States right now, everywhere you turn and look, I mean, there's politics, there's anger, there's division, there's hate, there's all these negative things going on all the time. The good stuff is still there, by the way, but it's much harder to
Yep.
look for.
Yep.
How do we train our minds to be in a place of gratitude when the heaviness of things almost seems to overpower it during the day?
Any moment that we spend being grateful is a moment that we're not being miserable. So, you know, don't be down on yourself if you're not feeling grateful. Just practice any moment of it. Any moment changes your life. Um, And you'll see that it also helps you to become a more radiant person, and that spreads. You know, when we, it's not really about changing the world. It's about changing ourselves, because that is the best way we can change the world. We can try to change the whole world, or really more realistic, change your community, or really maybe change your family. What you really can change is yourself, and you could do it right this moment. It's really that simple. And it's not, I don't, it's not hard. It's joyful. There's nothing to lose through gratitude. It's they did a study where people, like before they won the lottery, and 6 weeks later they were at the same happiness set point as before they won the lottery. And people, God forbid, that became paralyzed, 6 weeks later, they were at the same happiness set point as they were before. But people that took on a gratitude practice, 6 weeks later, if they're still doing that, they are at a different happiness set point. They've actually changed their level of happiness. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. And as you were saying on your podcast too, and I heard you, things happen for you. All the challenges we go through are to refine us, to make us even better people. Really, they are to help us develop our gratitude muscles, as it did in your life. What you went through helped you to become a much better person. The challenges I went through too. I mean, this is, we're each given uh, personally tailored challenges that are the best fit for each individual soul to shine the most fully possible.
Well, I think that's something that, gets misunderstood on my podcast at times is when I talk about empowerment and grief, I always try to caution that we are humans, by the way. We're not meant to always live in one state or the other continuously. It's a very much a movement and a shift that happens all the time. It's always why I equate it to an ocean with waves. Grief can be something
Yes,
very, very heavy and very, very monumental. It can be something very quiet and very subtle. It can be both things, and it will
yes,
oscillate between the two all the time. And
yes,
so I always try to say that when we talk about empowered grief, it doesn't mean that in the moment of our loss, in the moment of our addiction, in the moment of our struggles we're going through, it doesn't mean that we're all of a sudden going to flip the switch to gratitude and all of a sudden we're magically happy and everything's fine like nothing happened. It doesn't mean that, but it means along that journey at a certain point, you will find that moment. And I can never tell people when that moment's going to be because it's your personal journey. Some people do it in a matter of weeks, some people months, some people years, some people decades. It really just depends on, what that individual person wants to move at the certain rate that they do. And so we're not here to
right,
judge that, by the way, but we're here to accept
right.
it and see it fully for what it is. And I think when we get to that place, we remove all those barriers and all those judgments and all those things of, well, you should do this or you should be
Right.
that or you should act like this. When we remove all that, that's when we're able to get to those places of gratitude and say that this did happen for me. As much as I don't like it, I accept it fully for what it is. And I understand that this was giving me what I was missing in my life. And I think you said that very well about addiction. I know a lot of people have addictions to meet a need. It's to make comfort in life is what it is. So
Yes,
I don't always see addictions as a bad thing and like most people do. I don't see it that way a lot. I see it as there's a void in somebody's life they're trying to fill. And if we focus on
yes,
how to help that person in that moment search for what they're
yes,
looking for, that addiction
yes,
goes away. So I feel like
yes,
we focus too much on addiction being a problem versus what's this person missing? What are they searching
yes,
for? And how can we help them
yes.
find it? Because this thing goes away when we find this.
Yes, that's exactly what that Japanese psychiatrist was able to see very quickly, which was amazing. The perception then to realize that that's what I needed. And I felt so very messed up and keeping everything secret and inside of me and nobody knowing what I was going through. And then by sharing it with someone like you're a coach, it's so very helpful to open up about these skeletons in our closet, the secrets that we have that feel really horrible because once they're in the light, it just didn't feel as bad once I was sharing it. And but what I do feel is once we do develop more gratitude in life, when we practice it, we're never running on empty again, like I felt I was in those years of grief. Um, it's never, there will always be challenges, the challenges that make us try to find balance again in our life. We're going this way or that way, but it's 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 not the same. Like I can become balanced so much more easily now because I keep practicing gratitude. I find balance again in a much shorter period of time. Um, that's what changes. When you've practiced it on small things, when you practice gratitude on the things that you don't normally have gratitude for in your life, it spreads out into more and more things. That's just how it works in such a wonderful way like that.
Yeah, one of the
And
one of the
also,
moments. Oh yeah.
oh,
No, no, go ahead, Brock.
no, I just wanted to say one other thing. Like, let's say like a person relapses and they like in terms of overeating and they have um like they have 20 cookies and you could go, you could still be grateful. I had 20 cookies. I didn't have 50 cookies. And if they have 50 cookies, they could say, I'm so grateful I didn't have 250 cookies. There's always what to be grateful for because that inner voice is going to tell you, oh, you already binged and had so much, you might as well just keep going and just eat more stuff. And it's all putting you in that place of feeling guilt and shame and bringing you down and taking you away from gratitude and making you very self-focused. So go back into the world of connection, and that's appreciating what you have, the physical things, or appreciating another being, or appreciating that you could give to your community. And a higher level is appreciating creativity, appreciating what unique gifts you have, because every single person has unique gifts to give in the world. Like, and when you do that, when you're in a creative zone, like making a podcast, for instance, you don't feel like eating or sleeping, and you're like beyond time. You're on such a high. These are like natural ways to reconnect with the world. We hear it like volunteer, exercise, eat healthy, but now you can understand why these things work. Because when you do these things, they actually fill your soul with gratitude. When you do them with gratitude, the only price you have to pay to climb the pleasure ladder is gratitude. That's it.
That's beautifully said, Bracha. Well, as we wrap up the podcast today, I wanted to ask you about your books. When did you start writing your books? And, when did you decide you wanted to write children only books? Did you decide you wanted to write books for adults? How did you get down that writing path?
Yeah, well, I started as a child I was writing. As you see, from that, because I stuck my things in here. I was writing poems. I like to write, get to the point. I like to simplify things like the deepest concepts in life in the most simple way. And that's what I do. That's why a children's book is the perfect thing for me. And in fact, one of my books is called I Lost Someone Special. It's about how does a child feel when they lose someone special in their lives. And it's about what to do mainly is to do good deeds in that person's memory. And that keeps the relationship going forever. It keeps their spirit alive. It keeps you feeling grateful for that person. It keeps them a part of your life. And I know that's what you're doing because you're helping so many people through your loss. Eh, so yeah, so I just started writing books for children. The Happiness Box teaches children how to be grateful. Um, and the mother always said, yes, yeah, this is like a child's fantasy. What if you could get everything you wanted? What if your mother gave you everything you wanted all the time? And you get to see through the pictures. Oh my gosh, it becomes a really dysfunctional life, you know? It's not that great. It's so much better to have a life of just simply appreciating what you do have. And, you don't need all these things. That's not going to bring happiness. So that's why I love writing for children, writing in a simple, joyful way, um, and teaching children from the very beginning of life to see the world that way, or rather what we had to do is to you can come to it later on in life, but it's great if you have the chance, because if you start off that way, you're just exponentially growing if you get to see the world through joyful eyes and understand these happiness skills and can integrate them early on in life.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And where could we find your books if we wanted to purchase them?
My children have made the most beautiful website. It's called Growing Impact Publications. And that's what we're doing. We're spreading this impact all around the world of how, we're growing gratitude in children and adults. Who adults read the books to the children, so they're also gaining the skills as they read the books.
That's
Yeah.
really beautiful. Well, Bracha, I'm gonna have all your social media sites and your website links in the show notes for all the listeners. So when they get done listening to the podcast episode today, they can go into the show notes and click the links and get connected with you. I wanted to ask if you can tell listeners what social media platforms you're on.
Okay, LinkedIn, Facebook, Pinterest, what else? Yeah, Instagram. Yeah, every place, I think. Yeah, Twitter, all those places. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Bracha, I just want to say a big thank you to you coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to hear your perspective and story of overcoming eating addictions and learning how to go through gratitude. And I'm really glad that you went on a spiritual journey because I think a lot of people don't do that and really should because you can find a deeper purpose and meaning to your own life. And something that I want listeners to take away from Bracha's episode today is that we all, every single one of us, have an individual mission. We have an individual set of gifts and lessons and blessings in our life that we're meant to discover. We're meant to walk this path on the planet with. And to celebrate our individuality is something that should be widely recognized. And we should all realize that through gratitude, by the way, I call it gratitude, appreciation, and contribution is where I live my life. And I will say that when you live in those buckets and you live in that place of your own journey, your own path, and you fulfill your mission the way Braca has with gratitude, you'll find happiness not in the external things of life, but you will find it from a deep place within. And you'll be able to serve people too, by the way, that were where you once were, to help them find their way forward in life. So, Braca, thank you so much for being a guest on today's show.
That was so beautiful. Thank you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Braca and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Braca's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.